Good morning, everyone. I'm Jade Hall, Grosvenor's Marketing Manager and your organiser for today. Welcome to our webinar on the 2016 Supplier Leadership Study, How Small Procurement Teams Can Boost Performance by 27%, presented by Dr. Stefan Gassner. Allow me to introduce today's presenter and expert on supplier leadership, Dr. Stefan Gassner. Head of Grosvenor's procurement and contracting practice, Stefan is passionate about helping our clients transform their procurement function, manage their high-stakes procurement projects, and improve supplier performance. Stefan has trained over 400 people in supplier management, has a PhD in procurement, and is also a lecturer for strategic procurement at the University of Technology, Sydney. So please welcome Stefan.
Thank you, Jade. Very much appreciated. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Before I head over to what we found in our study and the great results from it, let me allow you to introduce to you what we're doing at Grosvenor and what our procurement services are. So Jade just said briefly we have 3 different service lines. The first being high stakes procurements, and this is really what traditional procurement consulting is. Running procurements for clients that are of a high stakes nature, so typically highly complex or critical for achieving business goals, quite often also very high in value. Procurement transformation is where we review our clients' procurement practices, processes, templates, people, categories, spend, whatever it is, and we come up with how they can improve their procurement function to align it with better practice. The third of our service lines is supplier management, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. So this is our newest service offering, and it really is around, it's fine to have a great contract in place, but it's even better if you then also get the performance out of that contract that you need to get out of that contract. So really, the hard work only starts once the contract is signed, in this service line we help our clients turn around dysfunctional contracts, but also get the most they need to get out of the contract in performance. So today we'll be talking about our supplier leadership study that we've conducted earlier this year, quite some interesting findings came out of this. Probably you wouldn't have thought too much about in the past what supplier leadership could actually mean. So let me introduce to you these 2 case studies. 2 case studies from 2 of our clients, you'll see how supplier leadership sort of comes through in both of them. So the first case study, our client got a call from one of the head contractors, and it was a construction contract. And the head contractor notified the contract manager at the department we worked with that a subcontractor incurred lost time to injury, but they actually didn't report it because they knew there's KPIs attached to it, and if there is lost time to injury, that will have ramifications. The contract manager on our client side then looked into the contract, and they saw there's a provision in there that they can sting the head contractor for $30,000 penalty. The client thought, oh, hang on a minute, that's a great way of us achieving the budget that we need this year, so we'll actually save some money if we sting them. That's great. What they obviously didn't consider is that this has a big impact on the supplier, because you just showed leadership in a certain direction, which is we actually don't care about the lost time to injury as long as we can save money. And it impacts the behavior of the supplier going forward. So what the head contractor will do in the future is never pick up that phone again, because they know every time they tell you that something has gone wrong, they will be stung and have to pay money or won't get paid. So they will do whatever they can to hide their wrongdoing in the future. The second client we worked with had a contract in place that was not quite working. So it was only 5 pages long, and as you can imagine, there were actually no clear expectations set about who is doing what and to what standards that needs to get done. So no performance measures, no performance metrics. there wasn't even a contract manager assigned from our client side, even though it was one of the, I think, top 5 contracts in the organization when it comes to business criticality. So if this contract falls over, a lot of people within the business will have major disruptions to their day-to-day activities. What the client did is they saw that this is not good enough and they really need to do something about it. So we helped them reprocure the services. We actually went to a different provider who was a much bigger supplier. And at the same time, we also uplifted internal capabilities. So we got a better contract in place that has clear SLAs. We established systems for effectively managing contracts, or this contract. And we put processes in place and people skills in place that allowed both of those parties to effectively manage the contract. So part of this was upskilling of people, which obviously means training. But we didn't just train the people from our client, but also the people from the supplier, so that they're effectively able to manage this contract that is now in place. About a year into this contract now, we were able to increase the performance of this supplier from about a 2 out of 10 to a much better place, which is 7 out of 10. It's not perfect yet because a lot of changes happened, and that's fine, but it's important that the customer satisfaction has increased by that much. So case study 1 really shows there was no leadership, and if there was leadership, it was in the wrong way. Case study 2 shows if you do show leadership, you will bring up the performance. So why does all of this matter? Well, we know that companies spend between 50% and 80% of their revenue per annum on external suppliers. And this percentage is typically increasing. It's not going to get any smaller than that over the next couple of years, with a still increasing trend to outsourcing. The leadership of supplier performance actually remains largely unexamined, and there is not a lot of literature out there, at least not in the procurement community. So that gave us enough reason to sort of do this study. Before we go into more detail of the study, I was hoping that I could ask you a question, and that question being, how happy are you with your suppliers? So Jade, if you could bring that poll question up. That's excellent, thank you very much. So if everyone can just quickly select one of those options that you have on the screen there. We'll give you a couple of seconds, and then after that we'll see how everyone is going and where they would rank their supplier performance. We've got some responses, Jade.
I'll close it and share it with you. Okay, so most of you, yeah, you're not really happy or you're not really unhappy. Sort of, you know, they're okay.
They're okay. Excellent. They're okay. Perfect. That's good. So, and probably one of the reasons why you're all in the webinar today. So that's great. And look, that's what the 119 organisations said that we asked in the survey as well. Oh, you're not alone. They're okay. What they said is they probably perform at about a 6 out of 10. And actually 25% of the people that we asked said that the satisfaction level was even below that 6 out of 10. That is quite interesting because it raises a lot of questions, at least for me. Such as, why is it okay for suppliers to only perform at 6 out of 10? I'm pretty sure that you don't pay them just at 6 out of 10, but quite often at 10 out of 10. What is it that we can do about it, obviously, right? Is the big question. And when I talk to my clients, when I show them this, is, well, you know, do you have a role to play in this as well? Or is it really just the suppliers? And quite often we see that our clients give less attention to their suppliers then they give attention to managing their staff, which is quite interesting. Why would you do that? Right? You want to have best performance from everyone, not just from your staff, but also from your suppliers, or especially from your suppliers. So that's fine, and the vast majority said it's about a 6 out of 10. But there's some people that just seem to get everything right. Those we call the champion organizations. They do something different when they manage their supply. And whatever they do allows them to get 27% better performance than everyone else. So they increase that 6 out of 10 to 7.6 out of 10. And I really want to know how they do that. What they also are able to do is they only spend half the amount of time managing their service providers. So when a normal organization spends about 14 hours per week on managing their suppliers, these champion organizations only spend about 6.5 hours on managing their suppliers. So hang on a minute, they get about a quarter more performance and they only have to spend half the amount of time managing their suppliers. So really, what is it that they do differently to achieve those results? Look, what they do different is obviously they show different leadership skills and they show different leadership styles. And to go into this, I'll explain to you what the 4 typical leadership styles are. I've adapted those from HR research. So there is something out there that's called the leadership body of literature in the human resources space. When going through that, it's just very obvious that this would apply to suppliers as well as internal staff. But funnily enough, there's not a lot of research done that actually makes that link. So this is sort of the first research that we'll look into that and see how these leadership styles from HR also apply to leadership of suppliers. So the first leadership style is laissez-faire, and you see the deck chair there. It quite clearly describes what this leadership style does. It's basically the absence of leadership. Clients typically avoid getting involved. They're really absent when needed. They avoid making decisions. And it's almost like you hired someone new. You told them, over there is your desk, and I come back in 3 years' time. And then we'll talk whether your contract will get extended or not. So really in between there is no help, no involvement. It's just the absence of everything, especially of the absence of leadership. So what does that lead to? Well, suppliers will take advantage of this because, you know, a client that doesn't really care allows them to reduce their overall cost by reducing the services that they provide and therefore maximizing their profit. That's laissez-faire leadership style. The second leadership style is a bit different from that. It clearly specifies in the contract what the acceptable levels of performance are, and if those are not achieved, the contract includes punitive measures. So that's why it's called management by exception. So whenever something goes wrong, the client sort of steps in and hits the supplier with a stick. So a lot of these clients have discussions around the payments with their suppliers constantly. That obviously affects the relationship with the supplier. It's like if you have staff that you manage and you only sit them down whenever they have done something wrong, imagine what that does to the performance of the staff and to the relationship with that staff member, obviously, at the same time as well. So suppliers will adapt this leadership style, obviously, and they will be performing at minimum level required just to avoid that punishment. So they will do whatever they need to avoid the stick. They will even hide whatever the information is from you so that the stick doesn't happen. It is that first case study that we talked about, where the supplier would now hide every information that they can so the department wouldn't hit them with a stick. And the relationships are often adversarial. We'll see later on that both of those leadership styles, laissez-faire management by exception, are sort of bad leadership styles, and they decrease the performance of a supplier by at least 10%. When there is bad leadership styles, there's also good leadership styles. And one of the better leadership styles is contingent reward. And clients using contingent rewards have in their contract carrots that allow them to reward the achievement of goals. At the same time, they always make sure that they clearly state what performance is expected. They do that in their contract. They also do that in every interaction they have with the service provider. So it's very, very clear what it is that I'm expecting from the service provider, what they can expect from me at the same time as well. So what happens if they achieve those goals? What are the carrots that they will be eligible for when they achieve the goals that I've set them? Look, it is a quite clear statement, but it's not always appreciated by everyone that I talk to. Fundamentally, suppliers want to do a good job. They don't get up in the morning and say, I want to screw this client today. I want to do a really bad job. Much like every one of us, when we go to work, we actually want to do a good job. And we want to demonstrate to the client that we are adding real value. So the supplier wants to fundamentally do a good job. And this leadership style of contingent reward actually allows them to do so, because it's very clear what is expected, what they're doing a good job looks like, and then also provides them with an upside for good performance. So what suppliers will do if you lead them with this contingent reward leadership style is they will do just enough to receive the reward. They won't go above and beyond, but they will certainly make sure that they hit their targets, that they get the carrots that are attached to those targets. And therefore increased performance over the average by 16%, as opposed to the ones that don't use this leadership style. Transformational leadership style is a completely different story. Transformational leadership style allows the suppliers and makes the suppliers want to go above and beyond what is required. Imagine the best boss that you ever had who was managing you. They are typically great leaders, and they do, in their interactions with you, motivate you to go above and beyond what is actually required. And this is what this transformational supplier leadership style does too. So the way that they conduct their leadership means that they encourage innovation, they will keep up morale, they are highly motivating others, and that leads to everyone exceeding the performance expectations. Relationships are quite often true partnerships, with all partners bringing to the table what they possibly could. The clients instill pride in anyone who's associated with this contract, internally in the organization as well as externally with the supplier. They communicate a strong sense of purpose. They always talk optimistically about the goals. They seek the supplier's input into solving problems whenever they can. And they spend time teaching and coaching suppliers. Very, very similar to what they do when they manage staff. And when you use this leadership style, we'll see our study showed you get 27% more performance from your suppliers. Were there any questions so far, Jade?
There was one a little bit earlier. Stefan, you mentioned that company spending on external suppliers is likely to increase. Broadly, what trends lead you to that conclusion?
Look, it's the sort of the amount of work that we get, I guess. So we just see in the market that more and more organizations sort of reduce the amount of activities that they do themselves. That is especially obviously in the back offices, but also in providing frontline services and components for end products. So the trend to outsourcing over the last 20 years has increased that percentage, and I would say it's likely to occur further as well. All right, was there another question, Jade?
No, that's all for now.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So if you do have any questions at any time, please just ask. I have a question for all of you now too. Now that you just heard about the laissez-faire the management by exception or sticks, the contingent reward or management by carrots, and the transformational leadership style. I'd be interested in what kind of leader you think you are. How do you typically lead your suppliers? And Jade has prepared a poll question for that again. So if you could just go through those and give me an indication of that, it'd be quite interesting to know how everyone sees themselves. Just leave that open for a couple of seconds, and I think people have selected where they think they sit.
Yeah. And okay.
Here they are. So what did we find, Jade?
Luckily, there's no laissez-faire leadership styles in the room today, which is good to hear. We've got a couple of attendees that typically use management by exception, contingent reward, and it's good to see that most of you are using the transformational leadership style.
That's excellent, very good. So obviously those of you using management by exception, quite often that is because you just don't have the time to do anything other than that. And with contingent reward as well, the leadership style is quite often also dictated by how important the contract is for the organization. Certainly if you have a very important contract, using more transformational leadership will certainly get you the outcomes that you need for that very contract. Thank you everyone for that. Now let's see what our study said about using those leadership styles. And I mentioned this one here before. If you do use transformational leadership, you will get 27% higher performance. If you use carrots in your contracts and in your interactions with your service provider, those organizations that we surveyed who did this got 16% higher performance. Organizations that relied on management by exception and laissez-faire actually decreased their supply performance by doing so by at least 10%. So this is a lot of reason why we should probably spend more time on transformational leadership. That's great, but what does it actually look like? So a bit more practically, this is how those organizations used transformational leadership to increase their supply performance. So what works best, the higher the number on this slide here, so the closer to 1 it is, the bigger the impact on overall supplier performance. Those organizations who are able to inspire and motivate suppliers to achieve full potential have the highest impact on supplier performance. So then developing and coaching suppliers based on individual needs is the second highest. What does that mean? Well, much like individual staff, suppliers have strengths and weaknesses. If you help them address their weaknesses and build on their strengths, much like staff, they're way more likely to give you great performance. If you do take the time to sit down with them and start developing them and making them improve their business for you and for all of their other clients, they will always have you as top of mind and give you the best performance that they can. If you lead by example, then that leads to that you're typically being respected and admired by suppliers. So if you always just demand from suppliers to turn things around in very, very short time frame, but when they have, you then take 4 or 5 weeks to get back to them, well, that is leading by example, but not in a good way. So put your sort of actions where you want them from the supplier side, and align them with what your expectations are of the supplier. Quite often, what actually works really well is that not just the supplier gets KPIs in their contract, but that you also have KPIs and service levels attached to those. And then when you have a monthly meeting with the service provider, both of you actually have to prove that you're doing the best job that you can. And that's when we then enter into a partnership that is governed by transformational leadership. to challenge the supplier to achieve innovative thinking is also having a very big impact on supplier performance. Now, what does that mean? I worked last year quite a bit with engineers, and the client and I were thinking how they could incentivize engineers to do a better job. And we were talking about monetary incentives, but the engineer said, well, you know what? We don't really care about if you're going to pay us 10% more or not. What we do really care about is that we get a challenge. And we found that if we give engineers a challenge, our client is able to attract the best engineers within the client organization to work on their account. So the incentives for that supplier were certainly, for those suppliers, are not monetary ones. They are ones where they have to solve a puzzle and where they have to solve really complicated problems through innovative thinking. So whatever the client can now do to challenge the supplier will actually give them better outcomes. And organizations who do this will achieve better supplier performance, as it was seen here by the 119 organizations that responded to our survey. Great. So what is it that you can do as of today to improve your supplier's performance? Here are 5 things. The first one is, whatever you do, you need to express confidence. Just like staff, suppliers will only grow to their full potential when they're motivated and inspired. This is obviously not easy to do. This is a cultural thing that you need to change or you need to implement. And it certainly won't work by email, right? So expressing confidence, is sometimes saying, well done, even though you're not 100% certain that it's been well done, right? So a bit of a compliment goes a long way. A bit of understanding of the shoes that the other person is in goes a long way. And then expressing confidence that, yes, I know we can do this, rather than sort of being cynical about it. And that goes to all of the other 4 improvements on this slide as well. There is no room for cynicism in leadership. So if the client doesn't believe that the goals can be achieved, how can the service provider even think about achieving the goals, right? So again, it's that sort of leadership by example. If you don't believe in the goals, if you don't share the confidence, if you are not confident, then the service provider certainly won't provide the performance that you seek. The second one is, suppliers have a lot of knowledge, and all too often clients pretend that their knowledge is better than that of the supplier. Suppliers, service providers, work with hundreds of clients across various industries. They have very likely come across any issue that you're facing, no matter how unique your organization is. If you allow suppliers to solve problems in the way that they know works, because they've seen it elsewhere, that allows them to create a sense of ownership for the solution that they propose, and it also keeps them motivated because they see that you are listening to them and that you trust their experience. And overall, it will lead to better solutions, as we've seen in our study. Always talk enthusiastically about your goals. That goes together with expressing confidence. It keeps everyone motivated. If you don't believe in the goals, who else will? So you need to clearly state what the goals are, first of all, and then talk enthusiastically and constructively about how those goals can be achieved. You also want to set specific and measurable performance targets. So this goes back to using some of that contingent reward, the carrots. So clearly make sure that you don't say, I want to improve customer satisfaction, but clearly attach targets to that. So I want to improve customer satisfaction by 20% year on year. That makes it very measurable, that makes it very tangible for everyone involved, and it makes it very easy to communicate what it is that we're doing. And if you then also say why we're doing it, then you will certainly have everyone on board and you will get great performance. once that great performance shows through, you do want to reward exceptional outcomes. That doesn't always need to be rewards in the sense of I give you more money. It could be I give you more interesting work. It could also just be, saying well done. It could be giving someone a great reference, referring them on to one of your business partners, for example. So it's not always rewards are just around monetary compensation. They actually quite often can be quite different to that and work just as well. Again, very similar to what you do with your staff, right? And it's not always just the money that motivates it. Great. So that sort of brings me to this last slide that just summarizes whatever we talked about. So again, this is important because 80% of spend is typically with external suppliers. Sorry, 80% of overall revenue is typically spent with external suppliers. The trend is upwards. About 25% of the 119 organizations we have spoken with in Australia say that their suppliers perform below 6 out of 10. There are certain champions organizations that increase their supplier performance by 27% and receive a much better performance. Also, at the same time, they reduce their time they spend with their suppliers by 50%. So they get more and without having to put additional work in fact, reducing their workload. How they do this is by dangling carrots and by using transformational leadership around keeping everyone motivated, around keeping up morale, around encouraging innovation, and that will then lead to everyone exceeding performance expectations and going above and beyond what is required. All right, thank you very much. I'm now more than happy to address any additional questions that may come through. Jade, are there any other questions at this stage?
Not at this stage. Remember that you can submit your questions through the questions pane or any comments that you might have.
Yeah, I just see one comment here that someone said that their sound was cutting in and out. I actually had a bit of a problem with that myself here too. So I hope that the sound quality was okay. I'll have to look into improving that for the next webinar. So thank you very much for pointing that out. I hope you still were able to listen in and get the main context.
Okay.
Are there any other questions that have come through?
Is there any way for suppliers to influence the leadership style?
Oh, okay. Right. So what can suppliers do to influence leadership style of clients, I guess? Well, that can be very hard. I would say, leadership quite often is a two-way street. And leading by example certainly is a good way to start. So that's probably what suppliers can do. If you expect the client to act in a certain way, start acting like that first. Show the benefits that has, and the client will follow suit because they will be able to see the consequences that are positive. So that's certainly one way to start. Other than that, clients and suppliers are quite often like a frank chat, so just raising this, that we need to both up our game and managing this contract is probably another way to get a start and to get a couple of clients on the board.
I think that's about
Excellent.
it.
That's about it. No other questions coming through. Perfect. If anyone can think of any further questions, I'm obviously more than happy to answer those after the webinar as well. And in that case, I turn it over back to you, Jade.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar on supplier leadership, how small procurement teams can boost performance by 27%. If you'd like to compare your leadership style to Australia's champions, head to our website for our interactive benchmarking tool. Look out for an email with today's recording and slides within the next 1 to 2 days. And also, as you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a quick survey on the presentation, and we'd love your feedback and appreciate if you would complete that. So on behalf of Grosvenor, thank you again for joining Stefan and I. If you have any questions about how to improve your supplier performance, phone or email us. We'd love to see if we can help. So thank you and bye for now.